guys, I'm Kimberly from Fat Quarter Shop FlossTube, and today we're going to combine our love of sewing with cross stitch. So we have some brand new free patterns. They're called Petite Stitches, and there's lots of different designs for seasons and all kinds of stuff. And you can put them on here to make you a little fabric basket. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. Very simple. Take our free pattern. You'll need some 10 count fabric, just a little bit of fabric for the inside of the basket, and of course floss to stitch it up. So make sure to subscribe to this channel so you can find more ideas like this, and let's get started. So what you're going to need to make this is 10 count cloth. We're going to be using the DMC colors listed and a size 24 needle. But what you really need is our free Petite Stitches pattern, which we have tons of at Fat Quarter Shop. In addition to that, if you want to turn it into a basket, you'll just need a fat 1/8, and you'll just need some basic sewing supplies that we'll talk about throughout. So let's start stitching. So you're going to take your vintage cloth, just like it comes packaged from Fat Quarter Shop, and you're going to cut this in half. Now, some of the packages have salvages on the bottom and some don't. If it has a salvage, just put it at the bottom, and we want to just cut it in half across the vertical line. So to do that, what's easiest to do is just fold it just like this and just put a ruler on it, and we're just going to cut right here. From one package, you'll have enough fabric to make 2 different bitty baskets. So now we have our cross stitch fabric cut, and it's time to stitch, which is, the best part of this whole thing. When you're looking at your fabric, we're just going to make a mark 4.5 inches across the top and the bottom, and just using a 4.5 inch square ruler is going to help. I'm going to make just a little bitty X right there. That's where we are going to start stitching. So we're using a friction marker today, and later that is going to disappear with an iron. Using the marker just works a little bit better on the vintage cloth than a pen does. You're going to start stitching the very center right here, and just follow our Cross Stitch University to learn how to cross stitch. And today we're going to be using 4 strands of DMC, and the 10 count color that we're using today is Heritage. So like I said, make sure to watch all of our Cross Stitch University for all of our tips. I'm going to start right here, like I said, in the very center. When I do that, it looks like I'm using the dark green, and I'm going to pull the thread out of the DMC skein. I'm just going to pull 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just cut. And always pull from the number side so that you don't get any knots. From here, I'm going to pull 2 strands. So 1 strand, 2 strands. I'm going to put them together into a loop. We're going to thread our needle, and that is going to give us 4 strands because we're going to use the loop method. And I'm going to start right here. And starting right here is important because that's going to give you the look that you're wanting on the front of your basket when we assemble it after this step. So just go to the back, go through the loops, and to get all of the weight of this out of my way and the bulk out of it, I'm going to kind of roll this up and put a little wonder clip just so it's easier for me to hold. And I'm just going to stitch. And of course, if you have any cross stitch questions, just put them in the box. So now we have pulled our fabric that we're going to use for our lining, and you want the lining fabric to be the same exact size as your vintage cloth that you stitched on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut them the same exact size. So just without cutting the vintage cloth, just cut your fabric. And this just makes it easier. Now you could measure and do all of that. That's up to you, but this is just simple and easy. So just cut it. It's going to be about 8.5, 8 3/4 inches wide by about 18. And for the lining fabric we're using a bee cross stitch fabric. That's the name of the fabric, and the color is Clover. And now we'll start assembling our bag. We're gonna first work with our vintage cloth. We're gonna put it right sides together, so your piece should be looking like this. You're gonna leave this top open. We're gonna stitch across the side, the bottom, and the side again. We're gonna use a 2.0 stitch length, and we're going to back stitch at the start and the stop. So from here, just make sure your opening is still at the top. Make sure you're working on the bottom edge, and we're gonna mark a 2-inch square on this corner. And I'm just using a square ruler that's slightly bigger than 2.5 and just putting the lines of the 2-inch right on the edge. And then do the same thing on the other corner, making sure you are working with the bottom of the bag. And I'm just using this friction marker. It will erase later when we iron it. From here, you're just gonna cut on the square. And try not to cut past the line. So from here, we're going to open this up and work with one side at a time, and you'll push one seam to the right and one seam to the left, just like this. Put a little wonder clip. And this is kind of stretchy, this fabric, so just be really careful when you go through the machine. Use a 1/4-inch seam and back stitch at the start and the stop. And you're gonna do that on both sides. Now our bag is taking shape. We're going to move on to our lining portion. Now we'll take our lining piece, right sides together, and we're going to stitch also around the edge, but slightly different. So we're going to go down the right side, across the bottom, and then we're going to go up about 4 inches to right here. I'm just going to make little lines. It needs to be far enough away from the gusset you're going to make. And then just leave about 3 or 4 inches open. We're creating this hole so that we can pull the entire bag through at the end. So we're gonna go the right side, bottom to here, back stitch, stop. Then we're gonna back stitch here, go to the top, and then back stitch. And I'm gonna do that with a 1/4-inch seam and come back and show you. Then we're going to repeat the same process where we create a 2-inch gusset. So 2 inches. We're going to cut. And then we'll do the same thing here. Push the seams one direction and the other seam the opposite direction. You can still use wonder clips. Sew with a 1/4-inch seam and backstitch at the beginning and the ending on both sides. And the lining is forming. So now we're going to take our cross-stitched piece and turn it right side out, and don't use an iron or anything like that. Just finger press, use your fingers to kind of poke everything out. It looks really nice, and it looks nice on this fabric because this fabric is very burlappy, and you're going to have the best results with 10 count. 14 count will not look as good. It'll look very chopped up. So from here, we're gonna put this with the right side out inside the lining. And then when you do that, you want the edges to touch where you have your seams. So from here, we're gonna do the same thing where we push one seam to the left and one seam to the right and put a wonder clip. Do the same thing on the other side and then just wonder clip the top a couple of times. And I'm not using pins because I think that that won't work as good as it would with regular fabric. I would just use wonder clips on this project. So we're going to stitch all the way around, and we're going to start on one of the seams, and just make sure when you're finishing off you cover your previous seams by about 1 inch. And you'll notice I pushed my seams the same direction it's already pushed. And so we'll just start right here. Now on this sewing machine, the bed is pretty big, so you kind of have to just scrunch it up a little bit to get the bulk out of the way. Now from here, you have this opening in your lining, and you're going to turn your bag right side out and just be very gentle as you pull everything through. So from here, you've got the little lining hole right here, and what you can do is just stitch that closed, and I am just going to push my seams in like that and put a couple wonder clips and just stitch over that, and just start slightly before the opening and end slightly after, and back stitch. You could use green thread, but I'm just going to use the same thread that I used to piece the bag. So this is how my stitches look. You could also hand stitch that if you wanted to. So now we're going to just tuck that lining in, and you will see that you see a tiny bit of that selvage, and that's why we put that at the bottom. And then here you just want to iron right here to get it nice and even, so that from the brown side you don't see the green, and from the green side you don't see the brown. So I am going to just leave the bulk of the bag at the top and just kind of go along here. Just do a little bit at a time. So from here, I'm going to top stitch about 1/4 inch from the bottom all the way around. I'm going to start again on this side seam and just stitch over my previous stitches. And the most important thing, it doesn't matter how far away from the edge you do it, you just want it to be even all the way across. So you can see my stitch, and it blends in with the cross stitch fabric, and then you're going to fold it down as much or as little as you want, maybe about 1 inch, however you think it looks best. And then I'm going to just leave it just like this, but you could run an iron across it if you want. This is how our little bag looks. And that's how you bake these cute cross-stitch bitty baskets. Now you're gonna wanna go to fatquartershop.com and check out our free patterns called Petite Stitches. There's a total of 13, but we're gonna be expanding. So have fun making your baskets, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.